Hello, everybody. We're in Chapter 3, Section 2 of your history book. This section is titled New England Colonies, beginning on page 64. American Diary. Edward Winslow, a settler in New England, was thankful that the Pilgrims had survived their first year in America. Winslow wrote to a friend in England, quote, "We have built 7 dwelling houses. We set the last spring some 20 acres of Indian corn, and according to the manner of the Indians, we manured our ground. God be praised, we had a good increase of Indian corn." Close quote. From Pilgrim Edward Winslow to a friend in England. Religious freedom, main idea. To practice their religion more freely, a group of separatists established the Plymouth colony in North America. History and you. Have you and a friend ever disagreed so much on an issue that you considered ending your friendship? Read about the reason why the Pilgrims settled in Plymouth. Unlike the Jamestown settlers, the next wave of colonists arrived in search of religious freedom. England had been a Protestant country since 1534 when King Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and formed the Anglican Church. Not everyone in England was happy with the new church, however. Many people dissented, that is, they disagreed with the beliefs or practices of the Anglicans. English Catholics, for example, still considered the Pope the head of the church. They were often persecuted or treated harshly for that reason. Some Protestants wanted to change or reform the Anglican Church. Others wanted to break away from it altogether. The Protestants who wanted to reform the Anglican Church were called Puritans. Those who wanted to leave and set up their own churches were known as separatists. The separatists were persecuted in England, and some fled to the Netherlands. Though they found religious freedom there, the separatists had difficulty finding work. They also worried that their children were losing their religious values and their English way of life. The Pilgrim's Journey. Some separatists in the Netherlands made an arrangement with the Virginia Company. The separatists could settle in Virginia and practice their religion freely. In return, they would give the company a share of any profits they made. The separatists considered themselves pilgrims because their journey had a religious purpose. Only 35 of the 102 passengers who boarded the Mayflower in September 1620 were pilgrims. The others were called strangers. They were common people, servants, craftspeople, and poor farmers who hoped to find a better life in America. Because Pilgrims' beliefs shaped life in the Plymouth colony, however, all the early settlers are usually called pilgrims. The Mayflower Compact. The Mayflower's passengers planned to settle in the Virginia colony. The first land they sighted was Cape Cod, well north of their target. It was November and winter was fast approaching. The colonists decided to drop anchor in Cape Cod Bay. They went ashore on a cold, bleak day in December at a place called Plymouth. William Bradford, their leader and historian, reported that, quote, "all things stared upon them with a weather-beaten face," close quote. Plymouth was outside the territory of the Virginia Company and its laws. Before going ashore, the Pilgrims drew up a formal document, the Mayflower Compact. The compact pledged their loyalty to England. It also declared their intention of forming a civil body politic for a better ordering and preservation. The signers also promised to obey the laws passed for the general good of the colony. The Mayflower Compact was a necessary step in the development of representative government in the new American colonies. Help from the Native Americans. During their first winter in America, almost half the Pilgrims died of malnutrition, disease, and cold. In the spring, 2 Native Americans, Squanto and Samoset, befriended the colonists. Squanto and Samoset showed the Pilgrims how to grow corn, beans, and pumpkins, and where to hunt and fish. Without their help, the Pilgrims might not have survived. Squanto and Samoset also helped the Pilgrims make peace with the Wampanoag people who lived in the area. Massasoit, a Wampanoag leader, signed a treaty with the Pilgrims in March 1621. The two groups lived in harmony. Reading check. Analyzing. What was the significance of the Mayflower Compact? New settlements. Main idea. To escape religious persecution in England, thousands of Puritans migrated to North America and set up new colonies. History and you. How would you react if someone set up camp in your backyard? Read about the conflict between Native Americans and the settlers in New England. In 1625, Charles I became the King of England. Charles objected to the Puritans' calls for reform in the Anglican Church. Persecution of Puritans within the country increased again. As a result, some Puritans wanted to leave England. In 1629, a group of Puritans formed the Massachusetts Bay Company. They received a royal charter to establish a colony north of Plymouth. This was the Puritans' chance to create a new society in America, a society based on the Bible. The company chose John Winthrop to be the colony's governor. In 1630, Winthrop led about 900 men, women, and children to Massachusetts Bay. Most of them settled in a place they called Boston. Growth in government. During the 1630s, more than 15,000 Puritans journeyed to Massachusetts to escape religious persecution and economic hard times in England. This movement of people became known as the Great Migration. At first, John Winthrop and his assistants made the colony's laws. They were chosen by the General Court, which was made up of the colony's stockholders. In 1634, settlers demanded a larger role or part in the government. The General Court became an elected assembly. Adult male church members were allowed to vote for the governor of their own and for their town's representatives to the General Court. All right, let me start that over again. Adult male church members were allowed to vote for the governor and for their town's representatives to the General Court. In later years, they also had to own property to vote. The Puritans came to America to put their religious beliefs into practice. They had little toleration for different beliefs. However, they criticized or persecuted people of other faiths. This lack of toleration led people to form new colonies in neighboring areas. Connecticut and Rhode Island. The fertile Connecticut River Valley south of Massachusetts was better for farming than was the stony soil around Boston. In the 1630s, colonists began to settle in this area. One such colonist, Massachusetts Minister Thomas Hooker, grew satisfied with the way that Winthrop and other Puritan leaders ran the Massachusetts colony. In 1636, Hooker led his congregation through the wilderness to Connecticut, where he founded the town of Hartford. 3 years later, Hartford and two other towns, Windsor and Wethersfield, formed a colony. They adopted a plan of government called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. This was the first written constitution in America. It described the organization of representative government in detail. Good land drew colonists to Connecticut, but Rhode Island was settled by a minister named Roger Williams, and other colonists who were forced out of Massachusetts. Williams felt that people should not be persecuted for their religious practices and that government should not force people to worship in a certain way. Williams also believed it was wrong for settlers to take land away from Native Americans. His ideas caused Massachusetts leaders to banish him in 1635. William took refuge with the Narragansett people. They later sold him land where he founded the town of Providence. Williams received a charter in 1644 for a colony east of Connecticut called Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. With its policy or plan of action of religious toleration, Rhode Island became a safe place for dissenters. It was the first place in America where people of all faiths, including Jews, could worship freely. Others followed Williams' example, including John Wheelwright, who in 1638 led a group of dissidents from Massachusetts to the north. They founded the town of Exeter in New Hampshire. Other Puritans settled Hampton the same year. New Hampshire became an independent colony in 1679. Conflict with Native Americans. Native Americans traded furs for settlers, goods such as iron pots, blankets, and guns. In Virginia, the colonists encountered the many tribes of the Powhatan Confederacy. In New England, the settlers met the Wampanoag, Narragansetts, and other groups. Conflicts arose, however. Usually settlers moved onto the North American lands without permission or payment. Throughout the colonial period, English settlers and Native Americans competed fiercely for the land. In 1636, war broke out. 2 traders were killed in Pequot territory, and Massachusetts sent troops to punish the Pequot. A Pequot attack then killed the 9 people in Connecticut. In May 1637, troops from Connecticut burned the main Pequot village, killing hundreds. In 1675, New England went to war against the Wampanoag people and their allies. Metacomet, the Wampanoag chief, was known to the settlers as King Philip. He wanted to stop the settlers from moving onto Native American lands. Metacomet tried to form a federation of local peoples, and many New England groups joined with him. The war began after settlers executed their Wampanoags for murder. Metacomet's forces then attacked towns across the region, killing hundreds of people. The settlers and their Native American allies fought back. King Philip's War, as the conflict was called, ended in defeat for the Wampanoag and their allies. The war destroyed the power of the Native Americans in New England. The colonists were now free to expand their settlements. Reading check. Identifying which colony let people of all faiths worship freely. Section 2, review. Vocabulary. Number 1, use each of these terms in a sentence that will help explain its meaning. Descent, Puritan, Separatist, Pilgrim, Mayflower Compact, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, Policy. Main ideas. 2, explaining. Why did the Pilgrims settle in Cape Cod instead of Virginia? 3, discussing. What was the significance of King Philip's War? Critical thinking. 4, comparing. What did the Mayflower Compact and the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut have in common? 5, determining cause and effect. Use a diagram like the one below to describe the ways in which interactions with Native Americans helped the Plymouth colony survive. 6, creative writing. Create a song that the Pilgrims might have sung as they crossed the Atlantic on the Mayflower. Write the lyrics from what you know about why the Pilgrims sailed to North America. Answer the essential question. Number 7, why did the Separatists and Puritans leave England and settle in North America? Okay, that wraps up Chapter 3, Section 2. Coakley out.